What's up, Dillio coming to you with another video. In this video we're going to talk about the pros and cons between singing live and also singing in the studio. This was a request video that I wanted to fulfill, and as a singer myself, there are different challenges and different things that are great about singing live and in the studio, and there are certain drawbacks between both of those platforms. So this video is for those who are trying to get involved or start to get started singing live or to start recording, because not everybody starts their music career at the same time. Some start really young, some start later on in life. So I'm just going to break down some things to look out for that'll help you be prepared for your next project. So without further ado, we're going to start with the cons and end with the pros. The first drawback of recording in the studio and singing in the studio is that the sessions can go long. Sometimes people like to hang out and chat in the studio when they come in. Sometimes the technology can fail and crash on you, and sometimes you can lose the session without proper backing up of the sessions. I've seen it happen to other engineers and other artists as I come into their studio. Then one of the things I try to do is make sure I back up on multiple places so that I always have the data. Another thing to watch out for, if you got somebody very important for you that wants to come by to the studio, if they're going to be looking bored, unengaged, or they may not be that interested in the session, try to leave them out of the studio, because that type of boredom energy can bring the energy down for everybody in the room. Another thing when you're recording in the studio that's a drawback is that you just don't know how it will go over with other people that will listen to your music. Of course, you and your engineer and your buddies can be vibing in the studio and y'all think it's great, but until you put it out in the market, you really don't know how it's going to reach the market. Of course, you can have a machine behind you that really promote the music and really push it out there in front of people, but until you really get out into the people, you really don't know how it's going to cross over. Once again, you can be feeling it yourself, but just because you like your own song doesn't mean the whole world likes it. Trust me, I know from personal experience. Now let's talk about the challenges you do with singing live. Now the first drawback of singing live is having a bad monitoring system. A lot of times artists and singers and crew like to blame the engineer for these problems, but I have to tell you this, that it's not always on the engineer, or it's not always the engineer's fault for not providing you the best sound on stage. Sometimes there could be a limit in budget, or there could be somebody on top who doesn't know anything about sound, who simply does not want to pay for the money to provide a pleasant listening experience for you when you're singing live. So that's one of the first drawbacks. Sometimes you can't hear yourself, or maybe don't have a professional engineer. There's so many factors that can go into play for your listening experience when you're singing live. That's why it's good to have inner monitors, but you got to have a tech that is capable of taking care of those needs when you're performing live. During live shows, you might have heard me joke about this a million times on my live streams, at how shows will start later than they're billed for, especially on the independent open mic circuit. You might see a flyer that says doors open at 9, shows at 10, and the show doesn't actually start till 12. That's another drawback, especially if you're still working the day job. That can kind of clash with your schedule, and maybe people are able to be out all night, and that's great, but not everybody can do that. So you have to be ready to deal with some flaws as far as scheduling is concerned, especially if you're dealing with open mics or lower level shows where they're not so quite organized and tight on the timing of the show. That can be a drawback right there. Another drawback of singing live, especially if you're an independent artist and you're trying to get started, is that there may not be an audience to get energy from. There may not be an audience there to vibe with, and the energy may be down, and you may just have an off night that night. Sometimes you have to push through that, you have to sing through, and you have to visualize that there's a crowd of 1,000 inside of a room of only a handful of people, like the staff at the bar, the band, the host, or other artists who are also trying to perform as well. Now let's talk about the pros for both singing in the studio and singing live. The first pro of singing in the studio is that you have a controlled environment. You don't have a lot of distractions involved, especially when you book a room. You usually have a professional sound engineer that can handle your needs and make sure everything goes good. And if you're paying top dollar for a studio, there's going to be a crew there, there's going to be water there, there's going to be people there to take care of your needs. It's a controlled environment, not too many crazy distractions are going on, which helps you focus on making your music. Another good thing about recording in the studio is that you can take as many takes as you need, but that's only limited to how much studio time you have. Now, if you have a nice person that will let you make as many mistakes as you want all night long, by all means enjoy that perk, but that's very rare, because a lot of times when people pay for studio time, there's a limited amount of time. So that's why I always advise singers, artists, rappers to prepare your stuff before you come to the studio. Make sure you rehearse before you come to the studio, unless you want to pay the studio for the time to rehearse in there. But I always felt personally that it's best spent, especially if I'm booked to record somebody myself, I want to make sure that they take time to get their music ready to go so they don't burn their money and burn their time while they're recording in the studio. Another good thing about singing in the studio is that you got technology to make you sound better. I'm talking about autotune, I'm talking about Melodyne, I'm talking about compressors, I'm talking about great microphones, I'm talking about a nice recording booth. All those things can play a role to make you sound better, and also they can help you to sound perfect on your recordings. You don't even have to really sing perfect anymore to get a perfect vocal, and that's one of the perks that you can have where you're recording in the studio. Now let's switch over to live. One of the things I like most about singing live is the feedback from the audience. Especially if the audience knows who you are. They may call your name for the background. They might say, oh, he's about to come in. Especially if you have an audience who knows what you can do and know they're going to get a good performance out of you. You can feed off their energy and actually builds confidence for yourself. And it's almost like a reciprocal thing of energy going between you and the audience. That's a great thing. That's not something you get in the studio. You may get a good feedback from a group of guys or a group of friends that are in the studio with you, but it's nothing compared, in my opinion, to a full house, knowing who you are, cheering you on, and getting behind you on a song that they know is the great vibe that you want to have. Another thing about singing live is the fact that you can reach more people very quickly than you can in the studio. Once you record in the studio, now you have to go through the process of promoting that song and getting out to the masses. You might have to buy ad space. You may have to do a lot more things so that more people know about your music. However, we have a good live sound setup and you have a good live show. There's a lot of people there, and there's a lot more people that can quickly learn that they like you, or they learn that they don't like you. But the thing is that you get a lot of people there that are quickly learning about your music, that are quickly learning to get to know you and quickly getting to like your music, and are likely to add your music to the playlist very quickly because they like the song that they heard live. And in that situation, you're more able to reach them, reach their hearts with your performance than you can in the studio, because once again, once you record in the studio, you got to get that song mixed and mastered. But in a live situation, even with your mistakes, you could still reach the audience. Another thing that's really good about singing live that I like is performing with a live band. Sometimes the live band can kind of provide drum fills and ad-libs on their instruments that you wouldn't normally get from a recorded track. Sometimes you can look at the band and they'll get the message, or they'll see a hand signal or a look, and they'll say, okay, we're gonna go further with this. And then sometimes at the end of the song, sometimes you might have a musician that can kind of ad-lib and chord a little bit differently and add a whole new flavor to the song that you didn't quite expect, that inspires you to sing in a way that you didn't quite plan to sing before. And all that builds up more energy that you can share out the audience. And when the audience vibes with that change and that flip and that organic spin on an original song, it just makes you want to even go crazy and go further with it. And it just keeps going till you guys got to stop the song. And that's another thing that is really cool about singing live. So as you can see, whether you're singing in the studio or you're singing live, there's a tons of factors that play a role in both of those. I really don't have a preference in either one, because at the end of the day, as an independent artist, you want to be able to create your music and invest in resources to create your music first, and then also invest in time and trying to get your music out to the masses, because if you're just going to keep it in the studio and listen to yourself, it's not going to reach anybody, and you'll never learn who you can reach with your music. That's why it's important to make content. That's why it's important to create what you use in the studio, and also important to perform. So at the end of the day, it's important to have a balance of both. Now, if you can create a captive audience just streaming and just recording songs that way, and you get a lot of hits and follows on SoundCloud or something like that, that's great. And if all you have is a live sound situation where you can book shows, you got a captive audience, but you don't really have a catalog, that's good too. But I always think that's a good idea to have a balance of both. So I hope this helps you in your musical journey as an artist, singer, performer. I just wanted to share my info on that. Going to be creating more videos. If you like that type of content, let me know in the comments below. Make sure you hit that like button, notification bell so that you can know when I post videos, and also hit that subscribe button so you can see more videos from yours truly, Dillio. You're watching Dillio T2K. I'll see you on the next video.
Dillio on the track.